The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is so strange and isolated. It's filled with endless forests and secretive little ghost towns. But there's one town out there that stood out from all of the rest, and that's Gay, Michigan. On the east coast of the Upper Peninsula, there's this town with less than 100 people in it. And most people only know about it because of the ominous black sand beach and the massive smokestack right near it that towers over everything like a warning. The roads out there feel endless, like there's nothing but forests there just trying to swallow you up. And when you finally reach Gay, it doesn't feel like a town at all, just a few buildings and houses clinging to a shoreline. The woods press in so close, it's as if the road doesn't even want you there. And the longer you stay, the heavier it feels, like something is watching, waiting for you to notice. And when you ask the wrong questions, the locals don't just go quiet. They look at you like you already know too much. There's something seriously wrong about that place, but we had no idea how dark it really was until we got there. If you watch regularly, please like the video now. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing, and maybe you'll like the video later. If this is the first video that you've seen, you have an entire channel to binge, so get started. And if you're watching on a podcast platform, consider giving us a 5-star rating. My wife Jess and I were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because we spent some time on the Isle Royale, which is a national park off the coast of the Upper Peninsula. We were planning on spending a week out there, but the trip was cut short. We ended up getting back 2 days early. We didn't want to spend any more time on that island. So we ended up back in Hancock, which is right at the edge of the Keweenaw Peninsula, with 2 more days until our flight took off back home. We were really excited about that trip, but Isle Royale didn't really live up to the hype for us. But we had 2 extra days to try to make up for it by exploring the rest of the Upper Peninsula. So we decided to rent a car and not just sit at the small motel in Hancock. And we planned on driving a long loop around the entire Upper Peninsula. It's really not that big, so you could get it done in 2 days, fairly easily, maybe 1 if you drive through the towns and only look around. So our plan was to drive from Hancock to Mohawk, check out Mohawk for a little bit, and then head east to the town called Gay. We didn't plan on spending much time in that town, because it's one of the smallest towns up there. But from Gay, there's access to this coastal drive that brings you north all the way up to Copper Harbor, and apparently it's one of the most isolated and beautiful drives in the country. So that's exactly what we did. We drove up to Mohawk, we looked around, it was pretty cool, and then we got on the road that's called Mohawk to Gay Road. Very creative guys, by the way. And we drive about 15 minutes until we enter this town called Gay. And we were researching it as we were approaching, and apparently less than 100 people lived there. We were expecting a damn near ghost town, so we're going down this long stretch of road, Mohawk to Gay, with forests just closing in on us. And finally, as we're approaching the town, I wouldn't even call it a town really. It's like a collection of buildings, and half of them are barely standing up. We knew that there was one establishment there where we could get food, and we planned on taking a funny photo in front of the sign. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's called the Gay Bar. And we thought it was really funny that they were playing on the town name. And we thought it would be a great Instagram post. Judge us. So as we're entering the town and we see the Gay Bar with the parking lot that we're going to pull into, right across the street, there's another building that seems like a rather important building, but we can't see the signage yet. And we see a large group of people gathered out front, and everybody looks a little bit hysterical. We couldn't tell if it was some type of protest or some type of city hall meeting. We couldn't believe how many people were congregated right here, because we knew that there was only about 100 people in this town altogether. And we're looking at a group of like 70 to 80 people. And we tried to research to see if there was some type of event happening, but as you get close to that town, there's literally no cell service. We had some near Mohawk, but once we were in this town, there was 0 internet connection, SOS on the top of the phone, 0 bars. And it really gave a small town vibe because these people were congregated in front of this building, but they were also in the street. And that is a small town thing. People were having conversations on the yellow lines of the street as if it's totally okay. When in any city, if you gather in the street, it's an issue because there's so many cars that drive by. But out here, you could just talk in the street. And maybe once every 40 minutes, you might have to step out of the way for a car to go by and you know the person in the car. Luckily, the Gay Bar wasn't past them. It was right before them, so we didn't have to drive through this massive crowd of people that seemingly all knew each other. So we slowly pull up and yes, we're staring at all of these people. and they're looking back at us. And very clearly on all of their faces, we could see that they didn't recognize us and half rolled their eyes, like there was something serious going on and they didn't want to deal with an out-of-towner. So we pulled into the parking lot of the gay bar and we park and we're looking at them and we're like, should we get out of the car? Like, what's going on here? Is this dangerous? Is this a bad thing? Is this a town that we shouldn't stop in? But as we were sitting there, it seemed as if it was more of like a town hall meeting. Like there was a guy on the stairs of the building in front of the crowd speaking to everybody and people were raising their hands and giving him information, but it was muffled and we couldn't really hear what was going on. But it didn't seem inherently dangerous, so we got out of the car and we started trying to listen in a little bit. But then from behind us, we heard somebody greet us. We turn around and it's clearly somebody that works at the gay bar, and he's being very friendly and very kind and waving us in, asking us where we're from and doing a full customer service routine. But I could tell the undertone was that he was trying to get us out of the parking lot because whatever was happening in front. I didn't think it was anything sinister. I assumed that he wanted the customers and he didn't want what was happening to scare us off. So he wanted to get us in as quickly as possible. So naturally we go in, he's handing us menus, we're sitting at the bar, and of course we start asking about what's going on outside. And he tells us to absolutely not worry about it. He's like, this is a small town. When issues happen, we resolve them within our community. It doesn't matter what it is. You guys just enjoy the history of our town, enjoy the food, and don't worry about what's happening out there. I promise you it's not the end of the world. But even from inside, we're hearing people shouting. We're hearing people being hysterical. We're hearing arguments. We're hearing a commotion. And I could see that the bartender's getting more and more uncomfortable every time we hear somebody shout. Their menu, not gonna lie, fairly limited. We had to get a hot dog and what seemed to be a frozen pizza. But beggars can't be choosers. We were happy for some warm food. And eventually, as we were about halfway done with our meal, somebody from outside, who's clearly a town member, came inside and signaled to the bartender that she wanted to speak to him. I was very happy that we decided to sit at the bar because they didn't really have anywhere to go have a private conversation. They tried to have a private conversation, but she wasn't going to lean over the bar and whisper in his ear. So we started to get little tidbits of information, and she wasn't trying as hard to hide it from us as he was. I could tell he was trying to signal to her like, hey, keep it down, I got customers here. But she was a little frantic, and no matter how hard she tried, her volume of her voice kept raising, which was good for us because we got a little bit of the tea. We got a little bit of the neighborhood drama that's going on. But the first couple sentences were a little bit cryptic. She wasn't very specific, so we were very interested. But once we started to get the real details and had a grasp of what was happening, it was totally bizarre. I'd never heard anything like this before. We're trying to enjoy our lunch, and this woman is telling the bartender that sometime last night, everybody's dogs ran away. Not one person, not 5 people, not 10 people. Every single family that owned a dog, some had multiple dogs, sometime the night before, every single one of them ran away. They don't know what time, they don't know what scared them, they don't know what happened. They just know that their dogs aren't there anymore. Some of them were indoor dogs, some of them were outdoor, some of them were livestock guardians. It didn't matter. Every single dog was gone. And Jess and I are looking at each other like, how does that possibly happen? And this woman seems to have no solutions. She doesn't even have a hint of what's going on. She's just mourning her dogs. Apparently she had 2 that ran away. And from the sound of it, her dogs weren't the type to run away. She could open her front door and they'll stay right by her side. But over 40 dogs went missing overnight. And after she relays all this information to the bartender, who's, I'm assuming, hoping that we didn't hear it, Jess and I start whispering about what could have possibly happened. And it's summer, but we're a couple weeks past 4th of July, and we're thinking, was somebody lighting off fireworks? Would they still be doing that now? Do they even do that in a town like this? Like, what could have scared the dogs off like that? And then we had even more questions, because we're like, some of the dogs were indoor dogs. How did they not hear the dogs escape from the house? We could understand the livestock guardians or the outdoor dogs, but you're telling me people went to sleep in their bedroom, their dog was sleeping on their couch, and in the morning, that dog is gone too? Something about this wasn't adding up. And we didn't have all of the specifics of every single person's situation, but from the sound of it, there was evidence that these dogs escaped the houses. If it was a dog door, if it was ripping through the screen, these dogs escaped their homes like it was necessary, like they were trying to get out by any means. And it's not like some dog kidnapper came. There was evidence that the dogs voluntarily escaped. So this was some type of unnatural phenomenon. And this entire group of people is very naturally congregating together and going, what is going on? But nobody has a clue. So we follow up with the bartender a little bit and we're like, so just all the dogs are missing? And he, went from being very friendly and trying to get us into the door to being much more stern with us. And at one point he said, "I thought I was clear that you should stay out of this. Our community could handle whatever goes on here." And it really made us feel like outsiders in that very moment. Part of us wanted to leave, but Jess and I knew that we absolutely weren't gonna leave. When I tell you finding lost dogs is damn near our pastime, I mean it. If we get a ring notification and somebody's dog got out of the gate, we're in the car circling the neighborhood with treats and water. I absolutely love dogs, but Jess would never in her life let a dog suffer. So when she heard that 40 dogs went missing, I knew immediately that we are not driving to every town in the Upper Peninsula. I knew with absolute certainty we are going to be scouring this area for at least one dog to save. I didn't even have to look at her. When she was telling the bartender the information, I already knew that our itinerary was completely changed. We didn't even need to talk about it. So after the bartender was fairly rude to us and basically told us to stay out of it, we finished up our very mediocre food that I could say because he was rude. And I looked at Jess and I said, "Where do you want to search first?" Because like I said, I knew. And she said, "Well, we wanted to check out that big smokestack in the beach. So let's check there first because there's some surrounding woods as well." I was pretty happy with that because I wanted to check out the major areas that we initially planned on checking out. So at least it didn't completely change our plan. So we pay our tab, we leave the gay bar, we get into the car, and we start driving towards the shoreline. And there's this massive smokestack that used to be a stamp mill in that town. The thing's like over 200 feet tall. And around it, there's these ruins of what used to be this like factory mill for mining. And then past the ruins is this shoreline. And the shoreline, the sand on the shoreline is completely black. And this place has a very unique feel because it's a beach and there's beautiful Lake Superior, but there's these concrete ruins with big metal wires that used to hold the buildings together, and large rocks and this black sand that is completely man-made. And man-made by accident. It was like residue from this mill that got put into Lake Superior and slowly was pushed ashore, creating this artificial black sand beach that I don't think you could find really anywhere else. So the first thing that we do is we go explore near this massive smokestack, and we're kind of peeking into the ruins of this concrete building, but everything about it seems like the whole thing's about to fall down soon, so we're not trying to touch much. And it's so broken apart that there's no chance any dogs are stuck in it, because there's holes in every single wall. We would be able to see them, hear them, they'd be able to escape themselves. So we decided to go to the black sand beach first so we could see all the way down shore in each direction to see if we see any dog in the distance. And if we don't see any, then we'll check the surrounding woods, but we're not gonna go too far because we don't really know this area. And if these are domesticated dogs, they're pretty likely to search for humans. So it's not like we gotta go on this like long trek to try to find them. They're not gonna go that deep into the woods. They don't even know how to feed themselves. So we make our way onto this bizarre black sand beach, looking over ice-cold Lake Superior that looks like an absolute mirror. No waves whatsoever. And behind us is this backdrop of this ominous smokestack and this crumbling old stamp mill. And we're looking around for these dogs, and we see one other person that's clearly searching as well. And we didn't want to approach the large group of locals because it would make us feel awkward. They were already giving us dirty looks. But approaching one that's by themselves to get a little bit more information was a lot easier for us because there's not this group pressure. They'll probably be polite to us. And if they're rude, it's like, it's just one person. We don't feel socially awkward because of it. And as we get closer to this guy, I'm looking him up and down and I'm like, he doesn't look like he's from here. He looks like he's wearing a construction outfit. He's dirty. And there's some other heavy machinery on this beach. They're clearly excavating this beach, moving some of the black sand. I don't know what for. I'm not a part of this project. But he doesn't look like one of the other locals. And I only say that because he had kind of like a city guy haircut. And he had a clean shaven face. He was dirty. He was definitely a construction worker of sorts, but he didn't look like the people that lived here. So we approached him and he's very friendly. He's not giving us dirty looks, but I could tell that something's wrong. And I'm assuming that he's probably looking for these dogs because everybody else was freaking out. And the first thing that I ask him, breaking the ice so he knows that we're in the know, we know what's going on here. I say, "Any luck finding them?" And he looks at me funny and he's like, "No, I haven't had any luck. Have you found her?" And we shake our heads and we're like, "No, we haven't found any of them." And he looks at me even funnier and he's like, "Any of them? How many of them are here?" And I reply, trying to get the weirdness out of the conversation because clearly he's not fully in the know. And I'm like, "We heard there was about 40 of them." And he looks at me and he's like, 40? You're telling me there's 40? And I'm like, "Yeah, it's really weird, right? They all ran away last night." I think I'm breaking this dude's reality because he's looking at me so shocked that I start to think we are absolutely not on the same page here. So I try to let him know that we're not from here. So as this dude's reality is breaking, I'm like, yeah, we're just passing through. We heard that all the dogs went missing, so we're gonna try to help for a few hours before we get going. And then it starts to make sense because he goes, dogs? All of the dogs are missing, what are you talking about? And me and Jess look at each other and she chimes in, she's like, yeah, all of the dogs went missing. Isn't that what you're out here looking for? And he goes, no, I'm looking for a woman, which is a very vague statement. So we stand there quietly waiting for him to continue. And he goes, I found something this morning at the beginning of my shift. I haven't been able to work since, I've just been looking for her. And it's getting more and more confusing. And we have to clear up this entire situation. So we're like, do you live here? Did you hear what was going on? And what woman are you looking for? Like, we have a lot of questions for him. And I could tell that he understands that we're like, okay, no, let's start from scratch here. So he puts his hands up, he's like, hold on, I don't live here. He goes, I just took a project relocating some of the sand on this beach. So I'm here a couple times a week. I'm a heavy machinery operator. I scoop sand and I move it. I don't really talk to any of the locals. I don't know what you're talking about, but this morning at about 4:30 a.m., like right at the beginning of my shift, I like to come out here early so I could get a lot of the work done before the sun's really beaming on me. I was moving sand, and I'm about to send my claw into the sand to take another scoop. And luckily I noticed her before I sent it back into the sand because I would have cut her in half. She was half covered in sand. I don't even know how I noticed her, but I saw something. So I got out of the excavator and I went around to the front. I started brushing the sand and I found an old woman buried in it. And she was breathing and she was alive. And this woman was wrapped in chains from her shoulders to her ankles, as if somebody wrapped chains around her and buried her alive. And I'm not from here. I don't know how these people operate, but I found this poor woman buried in sand, barely alive. So I start taking these chains off of her. I gotta grab tools for my truck and I'm working for 20 minutes snapping these chains off of her. And she's not talking, she's barely breathing. I don't know who to call. I don't know who could help me out here. And I also don't know if whoever did this is still nearby, seeing me find her and try to help her. So finally I get the last chain off and she scrambles to her feet and takes off running in that direction. And he's pointing towards the stamp mill and the forest near it. And Jess and I are trying to take this in like he just found a woman buried alive. And he's clearly frantic about it. He's been searching for hours for her. He hasn't gotten back to work. He didn't know what was going on in town. He didn't know about the dogs. He found a woman in desperate need of help. So he continues to explain himself and he's like, once I got those chains off of her and I got a good look at her, I knew that this woman needed medical attention and she was in some type of shock. She must have been tortured, whatever she went through. We have to find her. Jess and I don't know what to say, so we're just letting this dude give us as much details as he possibly can. And he starts to explain what she looked like. And he's saying she must have been over 65 years old. She was pretty frail. Her skin was pale, almost grayish, wrinkly, but also she was covered in black sand, so it could have been soot. And he said that one of her legs was seriously mangled. He said he was able to see it as he was taking the chains off because he went from her ankles to her shoulders. And he said that her left calf had almost no skin or muscle on it. It was like just bone, as if her flesh was ripped from her leg. But it was the only part of her body that was like that. And he said once he got the chains off, he was not expecting her to be able to move whatsoever. But whatever she went through, whatever shock she was in, it must have triggered some type of adrenaline because she got to her feet and she ran off with no muscle. No skin on her left calf, but she wasn't speaking to him, she wasn't communicating. She didn't move until the chains were off of her, and it was as if she had no idea that he was trying to help her. She tried to get away from him as fast as she could, and we could tell that this dude was dead serious. And unfortunately, as much as we love dogs, a mangled older woman with a tattered left leg is the highest priority. And no matter how awkward it was going to be, we had to go let everybody in town know who we should actually be looking for. So very unfortunately, we had to go back to town and we had to have a very awkward interaction. And we go with the construction worker, hoping that the three of us explaining to them what we should really be looking for kind of gets through to them. And now it seemed as if everybody that was congregated in front of their little city hall had went home, got hiking gear and outdoors wear, and came back. And now they were planning on going on a real search. So the man who is clearly some type of leader of this town, this tall dude with a gray beard with like a Finnish accent, is basically breaking up the groups to go look in different directions. He's leading this search. And we walk up to this group. These locals are looking at us very funny, very weird, like, why are you guys walking up to this group? Why are you here? But nobody says anything to us. We stand there and we wait for him to finish the plans of the town. And at the end, he asks if anybody has any questions or concerns, basically. And unfortunately, we have to raise our hands. So we get his attention, and all 80 people look at us like, what could you possibly be asking right now? And to be totally fair, I wasn't the one that found the lady. So my man, the construction worker, has to explain to these people why we just interrupted. And he definitely didn't do any courses on public speaking because he rambled for about 5 minutes how he found this woman. And about 2 minutes into the rambling, everybody was so annoyed, rolling their eyes, looking away, starting to walk away. And the town leader's looking at us like, I can't believe you're making something up like this right now. The vibe is that we have infiltrated this group meeting and we're trolling them as they're all mourning all of their lost dogs, and we're like making fun of the situation. Like, I can tell they absolutely don't believe us and we look absurd and annoying. And finally he finishes his ramble and says, she's somewhere by the stamp mill. That's the last place I saw her. And the town leader nods his head, very annoyed but not showing it, reiterates the plan that he had already told everybody, and then right at the end he says, and if anybody sees an older woman with her leg bone out, please give our visitors a shout. He wasn't being sarcastic, he added it to the day's plans, but you could tell that he was very dismissive, like, as we go about what we were going to be doing anyway, if you see the made-up thing that they are just talking about, give the outsiders a shout, making us feel as isolated as ever. It was one of the hardest things that I ever stood through. The only thing I could imagine worse than that is like bombing at a comedy show, trying to be funny in an entire room of people just looking at you with disgust and frowns. I was so happy when everybody went in different directions to go look for their dogs. And the group leader definitely didn't assign anybody else to go with us. Everybody went with their groups, and we were standing there near City Hall realizing that nobody's looking for this woman other than us. And it put a little bit of doubt into me. So I look at the construction worker and I'm like, are you being serious? Did you actually find a woman in the sand? And I could tell by the look on his face that he wasn't lying. Because he didn't get defensive or anything like that. He was like, dude, if you don't want to help me look for her, you don't have to. If you don't believe me and you just want to look for dogs, go right ahead. I'm gonna go look for this injured old lady. And by his reaction, we decided to stay with him. He wasn't mad at us for questioning it. He would have left us alone right then and there. So I told him that we'll look with him for like 2 hours. 2 hours tops, dude. And I asked him what places did he not look yet. And he said he hadn't checked the forest in between the stamp mill and town. He said he thoroughly searched the stamp mill, like we don't need to go in there, we don't need to go around there. But the area between the stamp mill and where the town really starts, he hasn't checked it all. So we decided to start at the stamp mill and work our way through that forest, which it's not massive. And if there's 3 of us about 10 feet spread out, we could really gauge if she's in the area. We could cover a lot more ground. So we told him, okay, we'll scan that area with you. So we get in there and we're walking. The forest is pretty dense. It's actually so surprising that people live out there. Like, that civilization, that small town is barely hanging on. If they left for 2 months, this forest would completely overtake everything that they built. And we have no luck for the first hour. No dogs, no woman, no nothing. And since we're seeing no sign of her, we're like, do you have any descriptors? Like, what was this lady wearing? And obviously, he was pretty confused about what she was wearing. Like, he didn't have the terminology for it. He's a construction guy. He's like, I don't know, like kind of like a long sleeve, long skirt one piece. But it was red, but it was dirty, like dark red. And the long sleeve shirt attached to the skirt, and it went like to her knees, but you could see her calves. So me and Jess look at each other and we're like, okay, that's a pretty good descriptor. We're out here looking for the color red. That's way better than looking for nothing at all. So about 20 minutes pass, we're still looking, we're all scanning the woods, and in the far distance, I see a little glimpse of red. For a split second, right near this area that seemed to be a lot of bushes, I saw what looked like 6 inches of the color red, and then it disappeared. So I tell both of them, I'm like, I don't know, but I think I saw something. so let's just head in that direction. And all three of us turn. We're still as spread out as we were, about 10 feet apart, but now we're honed in on that area directly in front of us. We get about 10 steps further, then she stands up. She was ducking near the bushes, and it's a woman about 100 yards away from us in a dark red long sleeve type dress with blonde hair down to her shoulders, and we could see the side of her face. She doesn't see us. She has her back to us, but she's kind of looking left and right, and we see a little bit of her face each side. And then she ducks back down as if she's crouching behind these bushes, and I'm able to see a little bit of smoke as if she started a fire back there too. And I look at Jess and she's like, that must be her. But Jess is also a little bit confused, and so am I. Then I look at the construction worker, and he's just staring in that direction. He's not looking at me. And that makes me think, this must be her. We found her for sure because he's honed in on her. But Jess and I were confused because that woman didn't look old. We're really far away from her, and she looks dirty and mangled. She does not look like she's in good shape, but she did not look like she was 65 plus. Her hair was blonde and youthful. Her skin looked like it was glowing. From where we were, I thought we were looking at a 20-year-old woman. And I know that Jess saw the exact same thing. So I'm like, we don't need to be spread out. We know where she's at. So I walk closer to Jess and I'm like, what did you see when she stood up? And Jess looks at me very matter of fact and says, not an old lady. And that's really all I needed to hear. And then we both look towards the construction worker. He stayed where he's at. He's not coming closer to us. He's about 20 feet away from us to our right. We're all walking in the same direction, but he's not looking at us. He's picking up speed to get to her, which makes total sense because he found this woman. He's been distraught all day, but we let it play out. We don't call him over. We just keep going in that direction until we close in on this lady. And the bushes that were in between us and her, we go around the left side and he goes around the right side. We see her at the same time, but her head turns towards the right, towards the construction worker, and we're standing behind her. And as we got around these bushes, she did have a fire going, and she's looking at the construction worker and has her hand in the fire. So we're looking at this woman crouched down behind these bushes with a full-fledged fire going, roasting her left hand, looking up at the construction worker and saying, "Help me." We don't even know if she knows that we're behind her. And we know for sure that this woman isn't mentally stable. She's voluntarily holding her hand over the fire as if she's checking its temperature. And as the construction worker closes in on her to help her and pick her up, he's so concerned. I had this feeling that he knew her because the way he looked at her, the way he embraced her and like rushed to her rescue wasn't that of somebody finding a stranger. It was like, I don't know how else to explain it, but it was more like a hero finding his damsel in distress, like, I'm here to sweep you off your feet. And he rushes over to her and grabs her, and she embraces him with both hands, like touches his neck as if she is the damsel and here's my hero. And for a second they lock eyes and I'm like, what weird thing is going on here? Until he recoils and pulls back in pain. And he puts his hand on the side of his neck and he's like dabbing it and looking at his hand, and there's like a little bit of goo and blood. And then I look at her hand, the one that she had over the fire, and she has a ring on one of her fingers. And her hand doesn't look like it's covered in third-degree burns. It just has like some black residue on it, but she's okay. But the ring on her finger must have been hot. And when she touched his neck, the metal must have burnt him. And Jess and I are trying to understand this bizarre situation that's unfolding in front of us. Again, she has not even looked back at us, so we haven't seen her face. But when he winces in pain, she says something like, "Don't worry, I have the perfect thing for that. I'll take care of you." And she reaches to one of the bushes that's covered in berries and thorns. And with her right hand, she grabs a berry and like squishes it and says, "This is a natural painkiller." But with her left hand that has the ring on it, I see that she pricks her finger with one of the thorns on this bush, and her finger starts bleeding profusely. And she walks up to the construction worker and presses the blood-soaked finger onto the burn that she just burnt on his neck. And I see her wipe her berry hand onto her dress, and she used her blood and not the berry that kills the pain. But that wasn't the weird part. Still haven't seen her face. I look at Jess. She looks at her, she looks at me, and Jess whispers, not trying to be rude, she's old. We can only see her forearms and one of her calves, and her skin is wrinkly, like this is a 65-year-old woman, and there is nothing on her left calf. It is legitimately exposed bone, and she just dabbed her blood onto a burn onto this construction worker's neck. And we're looking at him like, dude, look at us. This is weird. And this man goes, that feels so much better. And then they embrace, and she's hugging him around his waist, and he's hugging her and like tucking her head into his armpit and like rubbing her hair like, you're safe now. And he finally looks up at us and he goes, don't worry guys, I could handle it from here. Enjoy your trip. As if he's dismissing us. And I'm gonna tell you what, Jess and I were happily dismissed, because whatever weird fetish is going on right here, whatever this turned into, is not something that we want to be a part of. So we take one last look at him. He's covering her head and face, and he nuzzles himself as if he's smelling her hair. And we're able to see the side of his neck, and we see what looks like a circle brand, as if this woman just branded him with her ring. And there's like a little triangle and a Y in it, and her blood is dripping down his neck. And we are in the middle of the forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we turn around and let them do their thing. We're gonna go find the dogs now. You guys can stay in the bushes and do your warm embrace. It took us about 10 minutes to get out of those woods. Nothing in us wanted to be a part of whatever they were doing, and now I understood why the townspeople were treating him in that way. That was something else. That was something weird. Maybe they're used to his antics. Maybe he was trolling them. Maybe this is something that they do together, but we wanted no part of it. We helped him find the lady. She's safe, she's okay, they're embracing. Looks like it's happily ever after for the hero and the damsel. We get back onto one of the main streets, we poke around, now we're back to looking for the dogs. But it had been a couple hours, and we were hungry. And like I said, the only place to eat in this entire town where our car was still parked was the gay bar. So we headed back to it. We walked back to the gay bar. About half of the people that were searching for the dogs had kind of congregated back. Some were out front of the city hall. Some were loitering near the gay bar talking. We went back inside. The bartender didn't seem so happy to see us again. The locals definitely didn't like that we were associated with the weird construction worker, but we had to eat. And our intentions were good. Sorry we got caught up with the local weird guy and his grandma that he has a fetish with. We're really just trying to help you guys find your dogs. So we go into the bar. Nobody's really in there except for one very elderly man. Like, he had to have been in his 90s. The bartender is as polite as he can be, and we go ahead and we sit pretty close to this elderly man. Because it's not like this place was very big, and he was sitting at one of the tables. We wanted to sit at a table. We didn't want to sit near the bartender. And this man had some pretty good looking food in front of him. And I'm a golden retriever. That's what my wife calls me. So immediately, I ask this elderly gentleman, what is that you got there? I'd like to order the same thing. And he's got this big like meat potato pastry, and he's got a big cup of what looks like chili. And he looks up at us, and usually elderly people are pretty happy when somebody talks to them. They're down to chat. And he has a pretty deep Finnish accent, but his English is good. And he goes, this is a pasty. I've lived off these things, and this is a cup of chili. And I'm joking around, and I'm like, I'm gonna get the same thing. I'm gonna get that exact meal. It looks delicious. You have great taste, sir. And he holds up the pasty. He's like, you can't get this here. I brought this. This is homemade. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious and endearing, because he's like, this is the lunch that I like. My homemade pasty and the gay bar's chili. And that's what he came to do. He knows his ways, he's set in his ways, and he's gonna enjoy the lunch that he wants to enjoy, and nobody's gonna say anything about it. And you have to respect it. So we laugh, and I'm like, man, I'm jealous. I'll just get a chili dog then, because the chili looks pretty good. And we sit down near him, and we're just chit-chatting a little bit, and he's asking us what brought us to town. After he tells us about his history in town. He's lived here his entire life. He's 98 years old, and his family is originally from Finland. And we briefly tell him about our adventure at Isle Royale, leaving out many details. And then we tell him we were driving through, and the man that we ran into, and the weird thing that we just witnessed. But we didn't even really get to the weird part in the forest, because the second that we said a construction worker found a woman buried in the black sand beach, covered in chains, my man freaked out. He almost choked on his pasty. It looked as if he would have exploded out of his seat in his youth, but he's restrained to a wheelchair, and he doesn't have the strength in his body anymore to have a physical outburst. he's just kind of shaking his hands and hitting the table, throws his pasty onto the table and starts shouting and screaming and freaking out. And all I said was that the construction worker found a woman on the beach. I don't even think I got to the details about her leg or that she ran off. I didn't even get to the weird parts. All he had to hear was a woman under the black sand. And the man lost his mind. And this is the weirdest part. He started screaming, "Get the dogs." He's shouting to the bartender. Some of the locals are walking in. There's a couple other people in here. And they're all looking at us like we just set off a local elderly man. Like we're only here causing harm and havoc. And people are coming over and trying to console him. And he's screaming to get the dogs, get the dogs. And they start to wheel him out, trying to calm him down. And he's shouting other things. And now people from outside are coming in. And they look pissed at us. And he's yelling things like, harvest your gardens, protect your food, cover your water wells, get your entire family inside, as if he's like talking about like prepping for war or something. Like there's some type of famine approaching this place, and he's warning everybody and losing his mind the best that he can. If anything, it was very sad because in his heyday, it seemed as if he would have like got up and led this town, but he just didn't have the life force left. So it was kind of like this elderly tantrum. But he was clearly a town favorite. Like these locals adored him because the way they jumped in to protect him and try to calm him down, it was clear that at one point he was a leader here. He's a respected man, and we got scolded. I don't know how else to explain it. They came up to us and they shamed us. You guys don't live here. We didn't tell him because we don't need him freaking out. He served this community. Let the man enjoy his life. Why are you telling him the town's business? It's our business to tell him if he needs to know. And that was the most confusing part. And we're trying to tell them. We didn't tell him about the dogs. We didn't tell him your business. We ran into the construction worker that found the lady. You guys basically ignored it. We told him that. And they're rolling their eyes because they're like, why is he shouting about the dogs then? And we're like, we don't know. We only mentioned the woman and he started screaming about the dogs. He must have overheard you guys. We didn't even mention it. They don't believe a word that's coming out of our mouth. These people hate us, and honestly, rightfully so. They just lost all of their canine companions overnight, and we're waddling around their town as outsiders, like eavesdropping and injecting ourselves in their major issues. And now we're setting off one of their respected elders. And this caused a major commotion. People congregated. We were shamed, they were trying to calm him down, and the leader that was speaking to everybody was now there listening to him. And it caused another group gathering where the leader basically reiterated all of the things that he was shouting and freaking out about. So the man that was in charge now, present day, listened to this man. This man was really in charge here, or at least his decision making and his input was taken very seriously by the man that ran this place. But he's calmly reiterating everything that he said. Get at home with your families, get your food locked up, get your water locked up, and stop searching. So the entire vibe of the town changed. Now people were getting called in from the surrounding woods and wherever they were looking. They were getting called back into the community, and everybody was told to basically lock themselves up because something very serious was happening. But the one thing that wasn't making sense was that he was screaming to get the dogs. And we saw the moment that the leader told him that the dogs are gone. And at that moment, I could tell that the people around him looked back at us and believed us because that was new information. That was the first time that he heard the dogs went missing. But they weren't going to apologize to us. I could just tell that they hated us a little bit less. But the elderly man starts to roll himself out. Once he heard that the dogs are gone, clearly he had a plan B, and he's like, get out of my way. And in his heyday, man would probably be sprinting. I could tell by his shoulders, he was probably a burly dude. He was a problem in his youth, I could tell. But now, he was rolling himself as fast as he could. But he had something that he needed to go get. He had a plan. They let him go. And the leader of the town came up to us. He was not very upset with us. He knew by his reaction that we didn't tell him that. And we both start kind of like apologizing, like, dude, we really didn't do this. We were just trying to help. We're passing through. We love dogs. We got caught up with that construction worker. We're trying to justify what's going on. And the man didn't hate us. He wasn't there to scold us. He very simply said, thank you for caring. Thank you for visiting our town and spending your money. We're dealing with something very serious today. And unfortunately, your presence in town today is not helping. Come back in a few months. Come back next summer. But today I need you to leave. And I need you to leave right now. He said it very nicely, very respectfully. We're not going to give him any pushback. Clearly they were going through something. We were already getting weird vibes. We were only sticking around to try to save these dogs. And we listened. We just gave him a nod, very respectfully. We're sorry for causing a commotion. We walked out of the gay bar, we went to our car, and we started driving out of this town. When we got into the car, I remembered why I married this woman. She is the most observant person I've ever been around. And Jess asks me, when we're about a mile out of town, did you see his arm? And I'm like, no, I was looking at him in the face because he was communicating with us. I was being respectful. And she said something I was not expecting. She said he had the same mark on his arm as the construction worker had on his neck. That same little circle with the triangle and the Y. I literally saw it on his forearm. I didn't see it, but I'm absolutely not going to question what she saw. But it's not like we're going to go back. We were asked to leave the town. The locals were not treating us nicely, and we were already gone. But we also weren't going to be like, let's drive 15 miles away before we stop. They're not in charge of us. They have their small little town of 100 people, and when we're out of the city limits, we can explore whatever we want. And there was waterfalls coming up, there were old abandoned mines, there was a bunch of historical stuff. I don't care if we're a mile away or 15 miles away, we're gonna stop if we wanna see something. And we were far enough away from all of the commotion that we were like, it would take them a long time to get over here, so let's stop and check this out. So we pull over, and there's this cool little waterfall, and then very nearby, like I said, there's an old mine shaft, and there's some signage telling you about it, the last time it was operating, and who owned it, and blah 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 historical stuff. And we're trying to enjoy ourselves, and I'm trying to understand everything that happened, but I can't keep my thoughts in a straight line. I'm getting interrupted by something. It's like I can't put a sentence together. I can't connect any dots. And initially I thought it was tinnitus. Sometimes I get a ringing in my ear. It was like this whistle. I just couldn't get this whistle out of my ear. It was just happening almost every other breath, this high-pitched whistle. And I'm looking at Jess and I'm like, do you hear that? Or is that just me? Am I getting ringing in my ears? And she looks very concerned because she's come to a different conclusion than I have. And we're walking up to this old abandoned mine shaft that's basically just this kind of like metal sheer door, and we're hearing this incessant whistling, but I couldn't put a finger on what it is, but Jess clearly could. And she starts fiddling with this door to this mine shaft, and she's almost freaking out trying to rip this thing open. And now we're right up in front of it, and she's fiddling with the latch to the door, so there's like metal squeaks going on. But then I heard one that got me on the same page as her. When I was far away from it, I couldn't put a finger on it. I realized it was a sound from home. The incessant whistling is something that you don't know about unless you own a Doberman. It's called the Doberman whistle. They do this very unique whine that doesn't sound like a dog whining. It doesn't sound like it's coming from an animal. It sounds like the highest pitch exhale whistle, and they'll do it when they're trying to subtly get your attention. And it doesn't even look like they're doing it. It just looks like they're sitting there looking at you, but they're whistling. So then I start pulling on the bottom of it, and we're making some progress, and we rip this thing open, and we see a big head. And we're absolute dog lovers. When a dog is angry, it doesn't matter how much you love them. When they're angry, they're scary. So we whip this thing open, and this massive Doberman comes flying out. It doesn't greet us. It just had anger in its eyes, and its posture was that of a dog that was going to latch onto somebody's forearm and rip it off. And this dog takes off running. And the initial fear of seeing this big ass animal that was not friendly is completely gone because it's sprinting away from us. Within seconds, it's 100 yards away from us. This thing is fast. And we're looking at each other and we're like, well, we found one. Do we go track this dog down and bring it back to town? Or do we let the town members know? Like, how awkward is it? Like, hey, I know you just kicked us out, but we did find someone's dog. And in that moment, we didn't really feel like it was worth it until we heard some more rumbling coming from our right from this mine shaft. Very quickly, the rumbling turned into almost like a stampede, and dogs started shooting out of this mine shaft. First 2, then 3, then 7, then 8. They are pouring out of this mine shaft, and every single one of them, every various breed, it didn't matter, size, shape, age, they all looked viciously angry. None of them wanted a pet. None of them wanted a treat. They were barreling out of that mine shaft as if they had something to do. And at this point, I'm basically putting Jess behind me in case any of them start to look at us, because there's 40 of them. and within a few seconds, they're 20 yards away from us, 30 yards away, not even looking back, sprinting in the exact same direction that the first Doberman was. And we both realize at the exact same second, they're sprinting to town. So we sprint to our car, we whip a U-turn, and we start heading back to Gay. So fairly quickly, we catch up to this horde of dogs. For the most part, they're sticking together pretty good. Some are a little bit faster than others, but it is a herd of dogs beelining back home. And we're trying to keep our distance. We're not trying to run any of them over if any of them trip, but we're just staying right behind them, following them, seeing where they're going. We still don't have any service. We can't call the gay bar or call anybody, the local firefighters or the police station, to let them know like, hey, we're tracking the dogs. But we didn't really have to because they were headed to town. So we're like, we're gonna come with this herd of dogs and we're gonna be behind them. And we don't have to get out. We don't need thank yous or apologies or anything of that nature. But I wouldn't mind a friendly wave like, hey, you found all 40 of our dogs. But we're okay with pulling back into town because we got everybody's best friend with us. And we finally get to the turn that brings us back to the main street that has the city hall and the gay bar on it. We take a right in and we're expecting a celebration. Look, everybody's dogs have just entered town. How excited everybody's gonna be. We also assumed that everybody was going to be probably in their houses or still congregated near City Hall or by the gay bar. But when we took that right turn, it was as if we entered a civil war. It was as if we entered the purge, because all of the community and calmness and togetherness that was present when we were there just a short time earlier was completely gone. This town was in chaos. People were fighting. There were people trying to hide themselves in buildings, but there were also people running across the street, setting fires, fist fighting one another, trying to get into other people's homes. The women and the children looked horrified. The men looked like they were fighting the other men. People that were just searching for their dogs together. There were men ripping plants out of the ground of like the gardens near people's houses. We saw a man take a knife and cut into like a water storage system and let the water start pouring out. It looked as if the men of the town were actively trying to destroy the resources of the town. And some of the men were trying to stop them, but it was pure chaos. And now this horde of 40 dogs are coming in and everybody's ignoring it. This is what the problem was 20 minutes ago. But now I guess they rang the bell and the purge is going on. So the dogs don't matter. And we're trying our best to stay behind this herd and follow them, seeing all of this chaos brewing, all these fights popping up, all these fires popping up. And we follow these dogs about 2 blocks. They take a right. And halfway down this block, we see the elderly man. And he's in his wheelchair facing a house. And the house that he's facing is this decrepit, abandoned home. Clearly, shingles were falling off. This place was rotting. Nobody lived here for probably 30 years. And the dogs are sprinting right towards him. And we freak out. We're like, oh my God. He is completely helpless. He cannot get away. So we're trying our best to get around these dogs who have now kind of went onto the lawn so we could get up next to them. We pull over and we're shouting at him to try to get to the car so we could get him inside so he doesn't get hurt. But as we pull over, he has his hands up, celebrating. Like he is shouting like yes. And we don't know if he has any idea what's going on back in the main part of town because it is pure chaos. He should not be celebrating. So we get out of the car and we go and try to help him. He has all sorts of things in his hands, like little like arts and crafts things. And he's speaking in Finnish and he's like chanting and repeating it. But he's excited and he's celebrating. We're like, what is going on in this town? Who is this guy? We are watching a town implode and people go crazy. Then we look and we see where all of the dogs are going. And they're flooding into this abandoned house. Through the broken out windows, through the front door. Some are going around back. They're just flooding into this abandoned house, ripping off the side panels, getting in any way they can. And this elderly man could not be happier about it. And I cannot put my finger on what is happening. So I look at Jess. She goes, those are the woods. And I need a little bit more details on what she's talking about. And she says, that is the stretch of woods that we were in when we found the woman. And at that exact same moment, we hear a shriek coming from inside. But the shriek only lasted for like a split second, as if somebody tried to scream. But within 1.3 seconds, it was muffled. They couldn't get it out, like somebody put their hand over their face. And this made the elderly man celebrate even more. He's yelling things like, "We're saved," as if whatever's happening in that home is exactly what he wanted to happen. And then we see the construction worker stumble out of the front door where all of the dogs had just ran into. He doesn't have a mark on him. He didn't get attacked. He's totally fine. He doesn't look scared. He looks disoriented. And he falls to his hands and knees on the front lawn, but we don't initially go up to him to try to help. We don't know what's happening in there. The screams completely stopped. The construction worker pretty much collapses, and then all of the dogs start pouring out of the house. And we don't really know what happened. The first 5 come out. They're carrying something. We can't really tell what they're carrying. And then we see one dog where we know what happened in there. The dog had a portion of a bone and what seemed to be some red linen wrapped up in the bone. And then another dog came out, and it seemed as if it had some grayish blonde hair with chunks of flesh. And then we realized exactly what happened. All 40 dogs came out with a mouthful of the woman that we found, the woman that was found in the sand. And all of the dogs didn't look angry anymore. They all started trotting to different areas and digging holes and putting a piece of her into the ground and covering it up. We only saw about 4 of them do it. The other ones went further, but we could tell that's what they were all doing. The dogs tore that woman into pieces and scattered those pieces and buried them all over the place. And this 98-year-old man was celebrating that woman being torn to shreds. And the only question that we could come up with was, why did they do that? And this man looked at us with a big smile and he said, "They're the only things that are capable of doing that." And it was like in that moment where we realized that that lady was torn to pieces, the tension that was in the air in the town completely dispersed. We looked over our shoulders back to the chaos that was happening near City Hall, and we saw men hugging their families, and we saw people coming together. Nobody was fighting anymore. People were putting out fires. Whatever was happening was completely gone right when that woman died. So we look back at him and we say, what was that? And this 98-year-old man was very pleased to tell us this. When I was 8 years old, the men in this town started acting a little bit funny. They'd go hunting and they'd come back different. It started off slowly. Wells were being poisoned. Gardens were being torn out. Nobody knew what was happening. Husbands were leaving their wives and children, and they were spending time in the woods. Nobody knew what they were doing. There were attacks. This town was falling apart, and the dogs were disappearing. It started off slowly. A man would go on a hunt with his dog. He would come back without it. Then a few days later, he would start mistreating his family, and then he'd be gone. He'd abandon them. There was rumors in town that those men were spending a lot of time in the woods nearby, in the next town over. And there was whispers that whatever was going on there was getting closer, and the kids couldn't go out at night anymore. And as that group or that community that abandoned us started encroaching on our town, the dogs started to become inconsolable. They started freaking out. They all started running into the woods towards that group. And that's where the fighting started. The dogs got there first, and the remaining men showed up too late. They trapped the dogs in an old furnace in one of the mills. They burnt the dogs alive. And that was the last straw of the remaining men in our town. Fighting started, and they realized that it wasn't the men that was turning on their wives. There was something else behind them. And it was that thing that you found in those woods earlier today. That was no woman in there. That's something of the forest. And when all of the men that were protecting her were finally killed, it was time to kill her. But we couldn't. Nothing worked. Fire didn't work. Water didn't work. Weapons didn't work. She wasn't strong. She wasn't physically dangerous when she didn't have these men under her control. But she seemed to be invincible. So the only option that the men of the town had was to wrap her in chains and take her to the far edge of the pier and drop her in the water and leave her at the bottom of the lake. But over time, the stamp mill was pouring residue into the lake, and it extended the beach. All of that black sand is man-made, and it pushed the shoreline back far enough that instead of being at the bottom of the lake with water holding her down and the chains holding her down, she became buried by the sand. And that man dug her up today. And the moment that she was free, the dogs knew. They can sense those things. And unfortunately for her, she didn't have the time or the help to kill the dogs this time. She only had time to trap them. And for some strange reason, dogs are the only way to kill whatever she is. My grandfather told me that dogs have the purest souls, and that's why they're man's best friend. And that's why I believe they're the only thing that could kill something so wicked. They're not scared of her. She's scared of them. I hope you guys enjoyed that Finnish folklore. It's a very scary thing. We love dogs around here. Pure hearts. Give your dogs an extra treat tonight. They deserve it. Ripping witches limb from limb. If you guys enjoyed the story, please consider subscribing if this is your first time here. If you've been here more than once and you're not subscribed, come on. What are you doing? If you didn't like the video at the beginning, please consider liking it now. And if you haven't watched every single video on this channel, start your binge today. You're not meant to cherry pick this channel, you're meant to watch from the oldest to the newest. So if you haven't seen every single one, you're not enjoying it properly. We appreciate you guys, thank you for your patience. We're working so hard to get these videos out for you. We'll see you next week. And I think we're gonna go live tomorrow and give away some stuff, so pop by and win some free merchandise. And if you like this video, I'd like to personally recommend this one.